Hi, everyone. Welcome to our theory seminar. Today, we're very lucky to have Yevgeniy Dodis, who is a professor of computer science at NYU, and the winner of a gazillion Test of Time awards and the Best Paper awards, and a fellow of the IACR, and a close friend of mine for 27 years. So anyway, it's a very special. Is king.
Thank you, Anna. No, it's a pleasure to be here. It's been like a long time. Um, but anyway, yeah, today I'll give a slightly unusual talk. It's a survey talk. It covers a range of papers, but hopefully I think it's a good area, and I think it would be good if maybe some of you get interested in it. Anyway, so it's about random number generation and extraction. So this is a mandatory cartoon. There will be a few cartoons at the beginning. Okay, let's see. I have to click on this. All right. So I'll go through the thing kind of quickly just for you to read the cartoons, but switch to technical things. So randomness is needed everywhere. In general, theoretical computer science, there are all kinds of areas. Oh, okay, so something doesn't really work here. Let's see. They just so everything worked a second ago, but let's see. So hopefully the clicker would work at some point. Okay, let's see. Sorry about that. Okay. It's in the worst case, I guess. I'll click. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, it's okay.
You just gotta click in there. Now go ahead.
Okay, let's try. I mean, it was working a second ago, but this thing is.
Is it off?
I think I turned it on, but let's see. Maybe I'll just restart the presentation very quickly.
I think it's going.
Oh, it is going?
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
All right, great. Okay, so yeah, so last note, this is really important in cryptography. Many areas, for privacy, encryption has to be random, zero knowledge proofs, and so on. For replay attacks, unpredictability, differential privacy, all kinds of things, even efficiency. So without blockchain. I mean, I have to put some blockchain. I didn't put machine learning here, but I should put some AI applications here. But I'm sure. So anyway, because it's so important, there are also a lot of attacks. It's actually hard to get this problem completely right. There are a lot of attacks. The only surprising thing about the slides that I even co-authored a couple of those attacks somehow counts as a territory working in the area. But yeah, usually I kind of design schemes which are probably secure in some sense. And the point is, even though it's hard to attack, when the attacks work, they're like pretty spectacular. You kind of extract secret keys, do all kinds of stuff. Pretty bad. So the question we'll address instead is, well, we know it's important. How do you get this randomness of cryptographic applications, and how do you get it right? So, and the answer is traditionally something which is called. So let's look a little bit at what PRNG is. So unfortunately, this commercial is not that popular, but it used to be the Staples commercial. So it's like a red button. There is like a store called Staples. And basically, say every time you need, you just buy the red button, you click it, and you get what you need. So what is the red button for PRNG? You click on the button, you get a random number. You click again, you get another random number, like a bit strings and so on. So this is what we want. So this is kind of, but they don't sell it at Staples, I guess. So what we will ask, how do you actually implement this red button? Okay, but for the user, this is what you want. You want this red button, and this actually you get entropy sources, and there are many popular ones actually timing of interrupt. Work for me, but okay, we'll survive this thing. I'm tall enough, so the timing of interrupts, that's the most popular one. But people use like temperature of processor, keyboard dynamics, like timing between keystrokes, all kinds of stuff. And now I think I again lost this thing. So Zoom interjected again. Let's see. I don't know what it is. Okay, did I get it back? Sorry. No, it's not turned off. I think it's like I got like the Zoom thing is very aggressive. So yeah, I don't think I turned it off, but we can always do computer science solution. Right. Just stand here. Sorry. trying to see. Anyway, the point I'm making while trying to make the clicker work is unfortunately those sources, these entropy sources, we believe they have some entropy, some operability, but they're not perfect, they're not uniform, not independent, not fresh. And in some cases, like timing of interrupts, you can even say adversarial, maybe adversary shares something with your computer, it can generate some interrupts. It would be really bizarre if the adversary generates a couple of interrupts and it disturbs your system. So, so before going to technical thing, I want to make like a global point. So the way we deal with this kind of in cryptography, when we have a problem, we at some point do ad hoc solutions, maybe write some papers and so on. At some point, we converge standards. So in all many fields of cryptography, it's actually pretty mature. Like block cipher, there is a standard that indicated encryption, there was a Caesar competition. Digital signatures, there was a standard. There is a post-quantum cryptography competition. Notwithstanding the recent LWE announcement, still standing, right? So it's a relatively mature field. And where do random number generators stand here? On the surface, on the surface, I guess it looks kind of similar. Let's see, I'm very stubborn, so it doesn't mean that I will work. But anyway, sorry, I'm giving away my thing. So where do they stand here? There is a standard, but somehow the situation is, in my opinion, a little bit less mature than the other ones. So this standard, there are like papers attacking it, like at Eurocrypt. It's kind of even written in a very immature kind of, not immature, sorry, I shouldn't like offend people, but kind of ad hoc way. It's not like exactly, it says like, hey, you can do this, but it's like a lot of ad hoc stuff. It's kind of unclear why it's done this way. Some things are kind of, partially contradictory there. So part of the goal of this, line of work is at least to go from Golem to Smiggle, for those who know. But if you actually think about it, there is no reason I cannot be like most powerful follows them, because actually if you think about this problem, it's a little bit deceiving, but at least from the user interface, it's like the simplest problem. Some interactive thing, signatures, this complicated security, just press a button, you get a random number. That's arguably the least adversarial setting. So conceivably, we should be able to understand it pretty well and get something good going here. So that's kind of the hope, but we're not there yet. So what about, so the standards fail, and not surprisingly, if you look at popular operating system RNGs in Windows, Linux, and so on, Mac OS, they didn't give up. They didn't first of all, they're not using those standards. They're kind of useless. But they do have heuristic solutions for this problem, and they seem to work. I will talk a little bit about it. The only kind of takeaway I want to give here, so good ones, if you talk to anybody who designed real-world cryptographic RNGs, somewhere there has to be a cryptographic hash function, and we'll see a little bit the reason it is, and we would like to understand a little bit more. Okay, so if you look at def random, now it's actually changed. It's already changed, so I should a little bit update the slide. It's pretty complex. It was like basically security by obscurity. And there was no intuition for security. It kind of seems to work. In 2000, I actually teamed up with some folks who know how to attack things. They kind of gave me documentation. And literally, it was like painful to get those details, but like in 1 hour, it cannot be secure. It's like we found some technical attacks. They're not practical, but kind of under any intuitive definition which didn't exist, it was clearly insecure. So, that motivated us to write the paper. There was like an attack section on that paper, but also there was for the first definition, which introduced something called entropy accumulation and all those things, and led to a lot of work that I'm going to describe. So fast forward 9 years. So there is this Jason Donville who actually reworked the Linux RNG to its current format, which if we have time, I'll tell you at the end. But basically, the point of the thing, he wanted to meet, and he met with me, and we kind of talked about it. But the thing that he actually wanted to do, which is pretty cool, is he wanted to make this every component as rigorous proof as possible, which is like a crazy step from this security by obscurity that they have a while back. So anyway, and then we kind of started to talk, and after the meeting exchanged the emails, and he wrote some blogs and some documentation. And it was actually kind of nice that I almost felt like a little bit as a biased source of entropy, but for whatever reason he chose to look at a bunch of my papers, co-authored with great co-authors, and basically almost every component of the design at the end of the day he took some of our papers and partially incorporated them in the final design. I mean, not fully to my satisfaction, but much better than it was before. So I think it's actually a cool kind of evolution of crypto. It starts maybe with like practice, and there is, and then at some point, hopefully, they can, which was kind of cool. What about Windows and Apple? The story was actually better. Those guys doing things in a more silent way, but yeah, in Apple's was Yarrow, which was actually pretty decent. It had like a it introduced a couple of cool ideas that we analyzed over the years. Windows, like Ferguson Schneider, introduced this pretty cool thing called Fortuna. If we have time at the end, I briefly mention about it. And one important thing, even though the term entropy accumulation formally wasn't defined in any of those things, somehow not heuristically, but intuitively it seemed to work, and we actually proved it at Eurocrypt 2019 in some well-defined model. And try to account for an attack which we haven't seen before. It was like a really cool idea. It's like in the last 2 minutes of the talk, hopefully I can tell you a little bit more, something called premature output calls. It's like very hard problem to solve. So now all modern RNGs actually try to account for this advanced attack, but those guys kind of came out with this design without like full analysis, just kind of intuition. So we kind of, we abstracted this Fortuna design, we analyzed it in a couple of crypto papers, and we also looked at the super fast entropy accumulation mode. And it was actually a little bit of a two-way street. It started, but later, for example, I talked with both Apple people and with Niels Ferguson, and some of the things from our papers, small things got changed. They changed like the number of pools because of our analysis. They changed like some base from 2 to 3. So there was like some feedback back, which was kind of really nice in the final design. Anyway, the rest of the survey thing will be kind of about the theoretical work that we try to abstract those things and feedback them back. So what we're going to do first, we're going to start with the theoretician. So the way we usually do it, we have a bottom-up approach. There is a top-down goal, but we try to abstract the minimal important goal, we solve it, then we add another goal, and eventually hopefully get the whole thing. So we'll start with the easier problem, the problem of randomness extraction, where basically what happens is you want to extract things once. So you can do later. I'm sorry about it. So this guy, we're going to call it X, the entropy source. The output we're going to call Y. It's going to be equal to extractor of X. The little pile of coins we are going to call U. But the adversary will keep the picture of the adversary just to keep you entertained. So actually the goal now is for the adversaries to distinguish the output of this pseudo-randomly produced output Y from a truly uniform distribution. Okay, so this is the goal of randomness extractors. And I mean, this is nice, but the key question is what assumptions we make about X. That's kind of, there are literally a million of papers written with different answers depending on the assumptions. So let's start with the gold standard. So the gold standard here is, so the gold standard here, let's see, okay. I was going to use the clicker, but it's okay. So would be just to make this, maybe I'll try it, I don't know. Maybe the batteries are dead because even this thing is not working, so maybe we'll do this thing in parallel. I think I can do I think it should be possible to do this. I see. All right, at least I get it. Oh, everything works. All right, good. It's just a battery problem. All right, easy solution. Okay, so the gold standard would be, so never mind what is the exact definition, it's something called mean entropy, but it's some kind of notion of entropy of distribution. So as long as the distribution has some reasonable like security parameter of entropy, the output is uniform. Unfortunately, in this level of generality, it's impossible. So there are, if the only thing about the source that you know is the entropy, you cannot even extract one bit. It's a simple proof going back to the 80s. Yeah, I mean, I even, it's kind of existence proof. And if you know what the extractor is, it's a deterministic function. You just pick a uniform preimage of 0 or something, or uniform preimage of 1. It has a lot of entropy, but obviously the output of extractor is 0. All right, so let me skip a little bit of this detour just so that I have more time for questions. So what are the impossibility results of this extraction? Literally, I'm covering 100 papers and trying to put it in 4 not disjoint pieces, but overlapping pieces, but I think it's a pretty good view. So the first thing is something called seed, cryptographic hash functions, limit class of sources, weekend security. And what is the most amazing thing? Hopefully it will come to at the very end. The final RNG design, let's say Fortune RNG and so on, in different places, it's actually complex. You cannot just use like one little thing. I mean, there are reasons why you need to combine multiple approaches. At the end of the day, all those things play the role in the analysis, let's say, of modern OS RNGs like a Fortune RNG and so on. So it was, it's actually pretty cool that all this stuff is needed in some sense. So let's start with the CD thing. So let me explain what it means. So normally the notion of extractor is just, it's a deterministic function because the point is to extract randomness. You cannot assume extra randomness. But here we're going to do a weird thing. We say, listen, assume there exists something which we call a seed. The extractor now takes two functions, the source and the seed. And the seed is going to be, for now, even assumed to be truly random. So it's a little bit weird, but we'll see, if it helps. So the first thing we want to say, security will settle for statistical security. So the output of the extractor should be uniform even given the seed. So, and the canonical use is for key derivation function. You can imagine the seed is public, maybe chosen at once, and the source is like maybe independent, like a Diffie-Hellman, pseudo-random Diffie-Hellman group element, so it's kind of independent of this thing. So in this case, this is public, but from the source you derive this private randomness, right? So this is a canonical application of this seeded extractor. And the key property here is the entropy loss. So intuitively, for appropriate notion of entropy, we would like to extract everything. So the entropy loss should be 0, R should be equal to the entropy. Information theoretically you cannot extract more than entropy, but ideally we would like to get as close to entropy as possible. Going back to like channel capacity and all those like information theory considerations. So this is the thing. And there is a low bound, which is actually tricky to prove, but like an important result that says that the entropy rate, there is like a dependence between statistical error and the entropy loss. So the entropy loss has to be 2 times log 1 of epsilon. So log 1 of epsilon, like we call it security parameter. We can 2 times security parameter. And also there is a very famous leftover hash lemma which was used, has a lot of applications that used like in the famous, award-winning like papers building pseudorandom functions from, pseudorandom generators from one-way functions and things like that. So leftover hash lemma shows that we can actually match it. So it looks like the problem is settled. So this is like the gold prize. In literacy, there are prizes for this. Unfortunately, there are some limitations of leftover hash lemma. So one is that the seed is relatively large. In some applications, it's important, in some applications not. Even though it looks in theory it's like 2 times security parameter, it's small, in practice it's large. I don't know about normally, so I'm going to skip one slide, but just for Anna, I want to put one other slide. So I will not tell you why, but for some practical applications, we would like to improve the entropy loss. It's actually very, very important in practice if you have. Yeah, I'll explain. Yeah. So there is a lot of yes and no things. There are a lot of Boolean questions I will ask in the talk. We'll give you both positive and yes and no answers. So we'll look at line. So yes, it's optimal, and yet I'm not happy about it. And we'll see what we are going to do about it. So this slide, I'm just going to skip it, but there are a lot of reasons why in practice this is, basically, in practice, the heuristic extractors that people do, they have entropy loss of 0, and people kind of use it in their security estimates, despite their T-bounds. They didn't read their T-bounds, they just, kind of have different heuristic arguments for it. So the end result of this slide, which I didn't go over, is that practitioners prefer not to use leftover hash lemma and to use like some heuristic key derivation. And so one of the questions that motivated this line of work that I'm going to survey is, can we improve the entropy loss for this key derivation function for seeded extractors despite the RT low bound? And this is a slide for Anna. Is so just her favorite, I think, magazine that used to be like a while back, New Yorker. And you would think if, after all these years, like I've been in research for like 7 years plus, I would have a lot of New Yorker references, but in all those years, this paper about these things is the only one that I got reference in the New Yorker. It's not a very prominent reference, but it's a reference nevertheless. So we're making fun of the title of the paper, but listen, I'll take it. Any reference in New Yorker, I'll take it. And this paper, if you know, this is actually a historically super important paper. This is the first really a paper about cryptocurrencies, like about Bitcoin, in a major, kind of news outlet. Before it was like only in geek forums or something, and then New Yorker went to Crypto 11, came to my talk, didn't understand anything, made fun of the but that's my reference in the New Yorker. All right, so this is fun. Let's get back to the content of the talk. So how can we do it? So, and the question you're asking, do we really need statistically random to derive statistically keys? And for some applications, the answer is yes. So like if you think about one-time pad, for those you know one-time pad is it's basically equivalent. There is not much you can do. Somewhat surprisingly, in this line of work, including this New Yorker reference with a funny title, we show that we can beat RT bounds if we focus on extraction for cryptographic applications. So the key insight somehow is somewhat surprising. I'll give you a little bit of a high-level intuition, but not much about it, that there is a difference between just a pure problem of randomness extraction and the problem for key derivation for cryptographic applications. So cryptographic applications have some, restricted structure. In our language, it's like a restricted class of distinguishers. And for those restricted class of distinguishers, you can actually beat the RT bound. So this is kind of usually, I gave a tutorial at some crypto school about this. So, there's like 1.5 hours explaining this slide. So I'll do it in 2 minutes. So I will not give justice to this whole line of work. It's like covers like 4 papers at Crypto Europe, but I'll just give you kind of the summary of what we managed to achieve. So this computationally secure hash functions, the heuristic extractors, in some toy model, like 2-line toy derivation, which was informal, they kind of argue that the entropy loss is 0. So basically, cryptographic hash functions perfectly converge on predictability to randomness for this thing. So concrete thing, if you want to derive an AES key, which is 128 bits, you just need 128 bits of entropy. That's kind of a gold standard. But in red, so green is good, red is bad. Blue is like medium, okay? So there is heuristic. So LHL is fantastic. It's super general. It's for all hash functions. It uses something, in theory, it's efficient, and practice is less efficient than this called universal hash function. But it has this entropy loss. It doesn't have any assumption, but if you plug in concrete parameters, you need like entropy, let's say 256. Like 128 plus 2 times 64, 2 times security parameter. So in the first paper, the one that the New Yorker made fun of, we defined this class of square-friendly application, motivated by this famous Malevich's painting. Actually, it's not, but there is a reason why it's called square-friendly. And in that paper, we didn't change anything. The title of the paper was Leftover hash lemma revisited. So we just said leftover hash lemma already achieves better entropy loss for all square-friendly cryptographic applications, and it was half. It was, exactly half. The proof had to be refined, no assumptions, but for all cryptographic applications which are square-friendly, you get this 192. And this includes all unpredictability applications like signature max, also, semantically secure encryption, for example. It didn't include one-time encryption, but semantically secure encryption it includes. So basically, from our perspective, all more practically relevant things already for free you get it. Right? You get this kind of halfway through. And then, if you want to generalize it to all computational, you can throw a computational assumption, like pseudo-random generator. You need to slightly strengthen whatever the unconditional component, and you get basically something, the same thing. Here it's, put a star because it depends on the security level of PRG, but basically for practical setting of parameters, you will basically match this result for any, for computational indistinguishability. So for basically you can go halfway through. And then the paper which is the most surprising to me probably the least practical, but the most surprising to me is that if you, instead of pairwise independent hash function, use something which is security parameter-wise hash function, which is still polynomial time, but in practice, of course, a little bit inefficient, we can actually drop the entropy loss to log 1 of epsilon. So, and it wasn't like, concretely it was like 10. We figured out all the constants for practical things. So here we just get like 138 bits of entropy. So at least, in a very provable way, but maybe not completely practical, but still feasible, we could reduce the entropy loss for this application. Anyway, this is my...
What is the last column?
The last column is how much entropy do I need in my source to derive an AES key under various assumptions. So for heuristic things, it's just one-to-one conversion. Leftover hash lemma will be like double, and here we can get almost close to.
Okay,
Yeah, this is
so this is entropy loss of 10.
Yes, entropy loss of 10. Yeah, it was like log 1 of epsilon, but our exact formula was log 1 of epsilon plus 4. So it wasn't like a constant. So that's why it's 10. So log of whatever it is to 56. Anyway, I think we figured it out. It's 10. It's in the paper. All right. So this is what the survey of this line of work. Oh yeah.
And you haven't told us what predictability is good, frankly.
I briefly told some predictability is anything where, but let me mention some predictability applications are anything when the task of the attacker is to find something. Find like a string, like forge a signature, forge a MAC, invert a one-way function. All this is what on predictability application. Privacy applications.
So the application is actually requires a conditional assumption, but the extraction.
Yes, extraction piece. Yes. So application, we say whatever, the final application will be secure under whatever assumption was secure with true randomness, plus whatever the extra assumption you need here for key derivation. So we can do it in a modular way, separate key derivation from whatever it was needed before. So yes, so the final applications, if it was use computational assumptions, we didn't, we are not reinventing signatures, we just replace the, the randomness for them. Yes, so actually, it's successful. And I really enjoyed working on it. But is it practical? Can it apply to PRNGs? And basically, I told you I'm going to give you the answers to binary questions. So the did in our original paper, we kind of defined some model PRNGs with like some seed operating system. And the important part of this paper actually for the first time defined this important thing called entropy accumulation. But really no, nobody is using them directly, even though indirectly we are going to use it in the final design. One question is, it's actually not the most important question, where does this like chicken and egg problem? We need true randomness, but for the seed we need, we want to extract true randomness, but the seed needs true randomness. But you can say, listen, it's like you do it once, maybe like trust some organization or something. So this is kind of okay. The bigger problem, there is this hidden, well, not so hidden in all the papers, it's explicitly stated, but hidden maybe from this talk, that the source must be dependent for the seed. So if you hardwire the seed and view it public, and now, at least in theory, everybody can like look at the code. Linux is like, if you look at that seed, in principle, so you just make one interrupt who's, last, at a second, which is correlated with the seed, suddenly all the proofs go away. I mean, in practice, of course, it probably is secure, but we like lose all theoretical guarantees if the source can depend on a little bit. So we want to do a little bit better. And the real reason is, if you like, at some point I was like talking to this very controversial guy, Dan Bernstein, who is actually really good in applied crypto. He knows his stuff. But when I just kind of tried to a little bit sell this paper, being naive and not sure, he like looked at me like I'm an idiot. Probably said something to that effect. I don't remember, but basically he did have a really good point. The point is that you make these assumptions. The question is, what if the assumption fails? Like we often make assumptions, and we want like graceful degradation. And information theoretic constructions, they usually have this information theoretic like hashing or whatever. It's easy to find collisions, all those kind of things. So if the assumption fails, you can attack it like really spectacularly, like extract keys, make the extracted key equal 0. And we don't want it. While heuristics, these things built on cryptographic hash functions, which I'll talk about literally now, they seem to have graceful degradation, which we formalize in some sequence of work, which information theoretic constructions don't have. So anyway, so that leads to why you actually need to have cryptographic hash functions in the design. And one important thing, they're seedless. At least in practice, they use seedless. I mean, if there is a seed, it's like hardwired in some sense into some initialization vector. And we think they work in practice. The analysis, which was very limited work before our work, surprisingly, is an idealized model. And so let me talk about it. So here, let's imagine, I don't know if people know, but there is some very popular model called random oracle model in cryptography, which is universally accepted as a good heuristic of a hash function. It assumes there is a random function kind of in the sky, but abstractly imagine there is a trusted party who just gives you, for any input like a fresh random string, and if you repeat the input, repeat the string or something. So it's called random oracle model. So you can say, okay, assume I have a random oracle and I will use it as extractor. Random oracle will be my extractor, as that's what people do heuristically. And so it's G. So the attacker is to distinguish G of X from uniform under this minimal assumption, and here it becomes a triviality. If the attacker makes bounded number of queries to the random oracle, unless he queried it on the source, he's screwed. So it's trivial, so it was kind of, those are the kind of toy analysis that people do. But this is actually, if you look at it, and this really bothered me for a long time until finally, it just was like a really hard problem until we solved it in 2019. But yeah, it's explicit thing that the source is like a standard model source and the random oracle is independent. It was kind of hidden under the rug, but it was very unsatisfactory for both theory and practice. So from a theory, the random oracle is like an exponential seed. It's like, why do you need an exponential seed if you can have like universal hash function or whatever? It's like a complete overkill to do this. And from practical standpoint, it's hash function is public. Why can the attacker, choose depending on SHA-3? I mean, everybody knows it's SHA-3. So people say, yeah, but we don't know how to do it. So okay, so let me tell you how to do it. So we would like to define this, oracle. So we want to make a fair game. Oracle, but now we give it to everybody to distinguish it to the source, to the extractor, right? So it's a fair game. Okay, so, and let's try to do attempts, and this is again, yeah. Not the source, right? The source was kind of assumed like it's like a distribution which is independent of the random oracle. Just kind of, it's like a standard model, it's like a distribution with entropy. Now some pick an independent random oracle, and it seems kind of a little bit unfair. Right? Because in practice, the source is like this timing of interrupts. I don't know, computer runs SHA-3, so it's like it could depend in some weird way, but it could depend. So you would like to define this oracle-dependent sources and see if the random oracle heuristic still works for this oracle-dependent sources. And here I'm going to do the cryptography thing, but I'm condensing it. When I gave a talk about just this paper, there were like 6 attempts until we finally get at the right one. Here I'll give you 2 attempts until we get. In math, I could just give you like a full final definition, and you will be confused why, except that it works. But here I'll try to at least a little bit motivate that it's a non-trivial problem to define. There is like a definitional challenge here. So the first attempt would be to say, you know what, we want adversarial source, so the attacker actually choose the source, right? So the attacker actually chooses the source. The challenge is friend guy will give you either the random oracle or uniform. Tell it apart. The attacker knows random oracle, so it's he has to forget something. The oracle, so intuitively, even though the attacker can influence the source, it should have entropy even to the attacker in some sense. So formally, it has to forget something. And so, okay, let's say the attacker outputs the source and then has to shrink its state to something, not shrink, but whatever, like forget something, and conditional entropy. The source still now has conditional entropy of the attacker. This also doesn't work. For many reasons. For example, the attacker doesn't even need to make any random oracle queries. He says G of 0 is going to be my source, and I forget everything about it, but then later query G of 0 and get it. So there are silly problems like that, and actually, so I'm going to shortcut to the solution, which in my opinion is the right solution. It's kind of, I think it's somewhat elegant, but also when we look at our positive and negative results, it seems to match exactly what practitioners were thinking, and it seemed to get the right bounds also. So yeah.
So this is not on your slide, but
yeah.
So the only thing Merlin's doing is just clearing the
Yeah. Well, and sending you like he have a bit 0, 1, and just sending you is a G of uniform, and then technically you have to guess which one.
Would have to forget a large chunk of X.
Yeah, intuitively that would be required. It can forget a large chunk of X, but there are many other attacks beyond this. But here is like one thing. It's the attacker queries random oracle of 0, sends x equal random oracle of 0 and erases its state. But 0 is a fixed point. So now, it's a random oracle. So random oracle of 0 condition on empty state has entropy, right? But obviously the attacker will just require a random oracle of 0 after the challenge. I mean, there are many other uses. There is also this rejection sampling thing. I can pick a random x until the first bit of the extract. There are many attacks. This is just one of them. So as I said, normally I have like 6 iterations of this. Here I'll just tell you, there was like some problems. So here is the things that magically seem to work and some who seem to be the right thing. So it's a little bit weird, but anyway, so, but some works in pretty short. So the right solution seems to be to say, listen, the attacker, yeah, sure, it has to shrink the state, can I just remember x? But also, you want to say that x should have entropy both on its final state and the list of queries that the attacker made to the random oracle. It looks a little bit weird, but if you think about what are we trying to model? We're trying to model, let's say, timing of interrupts, right? So there is some weird, a lot of interrupts happens. Maybe the attacker controls some of them. So some whose end really doesn't come up. So maybe some hash computations happen on the computer during those interrupts. Maybe some of them caused it. But it's really not the randomness of the hash function should give it to us. So yeah, so intuitively it seems like timing of interrupts should have entropy, even conditioned on this, because we are really not trying to use random oracle as a source of entropy. It's like we just use, we're using it as an extractor. So anyway, so it seems like as a good trade-off. So we say, listen, x could depend on the random oracle interaction, but it should have entropy conditioned on all the random oracle queries kind of made, in some sense. So this was our thing, and yeah.
So sigma in your slide denotes.
It's the final slide.
That's the state, like
The state after it. So he outputs x, so he needs to know x, and then he kind of forgets some state. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's like the attacker, like initially it models both the attacker and the environment together. They know everything, and then it's like, well, but the attacker actually only knows this. So it's like a little bit more. We could separate it into this actually more powerful. We kind of merge them together and then forget what the attacker knows. So it's a little bit definitional, but somehow I feel like it becomes a fair game. And now the question is which of the results survive or not. And one nice thing about it is that the standard result survives. The proof is not very hard, but basically using the standard proof, even exact heuristic bound, survives, but now for a much richer class of sources, right? Because intuitively, because after the attacker has to forget afterwards, the definition, he can only win if a subsequent query after the challenge will be equal to the source, and this thing prevents exactly with the same thing.
So sorry.
Yeah.
But the high level. So
Yeah.
you're claiming that this models the type of attack where the adversary can control how interrupts
Right.
are scheduled
Yeah.
on your machine.
Partially, not fully. I mean, yeah, partially, yeah, with some entropy, even depends on the hash function. But as long as there is some kind of entropy, even after all the queries to the random oracle, there is some kind of entropy in the timing of interrupts. Even after that, now we apply the random oracle to this. It kind of works, and the proof is really simple. It basically exact thing. It's just this notion of entropy is friendly. So in some sense, it's like similar to what we did for leftover hash lemma. Conceptually, we didn't really change the extractor, but we changed the model to allow more realistic sources. So in this way, the same, right? They're saying, listen, hash functions are good extractors. We're not going to change it, but we want to explain better a wider class of sources to make a more fair class of sources. Right, and not just say, okay, it's like you make like, one random oracle query and then all the results disappear. So yeah, so this is like, this is a high level thing, but there is a lot of work to be done. This was just the first thing, but yeah, so this, I like it. I feel like this is a dependent sources, right, in the fair way. So we have an information theoretic version. Maybe in the interest of time, let me not go to it. The only thing I want to mention about information theory, so it's like basically a two-stage attacker. First, he has bounded number of queries. Then he has to forget some stuff with this condition. And after he gets a challenge, he can read the entire random oracle. It models this everlasting privacy, store now, decrypt later attack if you wish. But so this is actually a nice thing. And the nice thing for this kind of results, we do have a bound, but now we need to know the entropy of the source because afterwards the attacker. So actually these LHL techniques play a role here. So that's the only reason I'm kind of mentioning the information theoretic variant, because it is important. We would like to have for applications to everlasting privacy that you break SHA-3 later or something like that. So this leftover hash lemma techniques did come into play for these bounds. Okay, so are we done with extraction? I mean, we still have some time, so we are not done with extraction. Why? Because this is this was like a toy thing. This was like an introductory 2 pages in the paper. So in reality, unfortunately, this random oracle are not monolithic. They're built from structural component, and also the source comes kind of online thing. So we need this what is called online extractor. So I'll briefly tell you what it is. So the source is not comes in one chunk. It comes in big, in multiple chunks, and maybe in practice it's like this would be like individual interrupts, and maybe each interrupt has like 0 or 1 bits of entropy or something like that, and you just need to accumulate a lot of them, and it's like too unreasonable to buffer these things. You have to kind of operate in an online manner. So technically you have to have a bounded state in this stateful thing, and for each chunk you kind of process it one by one, and at some point you will start producing the output. Once you process enough chunks, you will produce the output. And this doesn't change any of the security definition, it's just the syntax. I'm putting more restrictions on the way the guy has to work. It has to be online, basically. It's just a syntax restriction. And the only important thing that I want to say now, of course, if we get an ideal primitive P, like a random oracle, ideal cipher, or something, random permutation, something like that, everybody has, oracle access to it, so nothing really changes. Yeah, and there is this finalized procedure. So technically, there is you keep running refresh, and at some point when you hope you have enough entropy, you actually click a human button, and that's the finalized. Oh. All right, so here is an example. So this is actually a very popular online extractor, which is used in many, it's called CBCMag. So it's actually in the NIST standard. So let me tell you what. So it is proven secure in the Oracle independence set. So in one of my papers in crypto, it is a prominent guy in the standard that I told you, and it's actually used by Intel real entropy true RNG. So in Intel true RNG, that was the use, citing that paper. So this is.
So you caused the problem.
Yeah, I caused a problem, yeah. Well, it's really Rosario. He's the guy who got me into this, but yeah. Rosario is the guy to blame, but yeah, I just proved stuff. But yeah, because the problem is Oracle independent, well, that's a problem, okay. We'll see if there is a problem, but okay, Anna stole my thunder, but okay. So this is a very popular guy, but now we can ask the question, wait a second, right? So this is like a random permutation, and you just kind of do it like block by block. So now that we have a full definition of this Oracle dependent setting, is it secure, right? So we have a design, we have a formal definition, is this secure? And you can probably guess the answer. It turns out no. Like once we have a definition, there is an attack. I don't know how practical it is. I do have slides about this attack, but I feel like I would rather go a little bit. So anyway, it just shows that you need like some subtleties and stuff like that. So a very popular design in this definition is secure, and actually I don't recommend to use this because there are better options which are probably secure in this setting. So I'll skip the attack, even though it's kind of cool. So let's talk about secure online extraction. So this is online. It's just repeated procedure here. Okay, so Merkle-Damgard, that's actually how, roughly speaking, how SHA-2 to some extent works. There is a compression function, and it just kind of iterates this. So this is a refresh procedure that refreshes the state, and the finalized thing just outputs this. So this is the Merkle-Damgard thing. And again, we proved it in the, that paper, we proved it in the Oracle independent setting, but luckily, a much more complicated proof, unfortunately. So this thing is like, the definition looks kind of nice, and it is nice, but unfortunately, those proofs are really long. That was like one of the long papers, but they're done only once. So we've done it once, so now people hopefully can use it. So anyway, so this is secure. That's great. That's good news. Information theoretic version, actually, if you call the whole output is insecure, but if you truncate it a little bit, which is reasonable for like SHA-3 things and stuff, if you truncate it by like 2 security parameters, it will be secure even in the information theoretic setting. But in computational setting, you don't need to do it. So this is like for Huga, he can, when he saw this paper, Huga Kravchik, says everybody uses HMAC, and he's right. So we had to like do a super painful, basically we couldn't do it in black box, we have to like almost cut and paste the proof and change it in a few places. But anyway, we can cover HMAC, which is what people use in practice, kind of hash function. And never mind what it is, it's like, now it's proven, secure. For some people, but in SHA-2 there is like a block cipher inside, there is something called Davis-Myers transform, so it's really reasonable to model this as a compression function. There is like a block cipher, like Chacal inside, whatever. So anyway, we have like a 7-page proof, in the ideal cipher model. So this is good. right? So these popular things are still secure. Just CBC Mac is only one, which is not so related to CBC Mac Sponge. So for those of you who know how SHA-3 work, there is this thing called the Sponge mode of operation. There is a gigantic 1600-bit whatever kind of permutation and kit permutation, and you kind of iterate this permutation, and at the end you just the output is the finalized thing. I forgot, but the finalized thing will be just the top bits, I think. Maybe I write it on the slides. Oh yeah, just output the top bits. So anyway, so this is a sponge mode of operation, analyzing the random permutation model, and as the seeded variant was proven secure by Stefano and Gassi, Peter Gassi, so we kind of proved it in the Oracle dependent setting. Okay, so does it really apply to seedless PRNGs? And the answer is yes, with minimal things. So I gave you the extraction thing, but with minimal changes, we can actually extend these extractors to give the full seedless PRNGs with input. And the only thing I just have to tell you what is, so right, so now I'm giving you extension from extractor setting, from online extractor setting, went from extractor to online extractor. Now I just want to output a lot of guys. Not just one guy, but a lot of guys. So basically I will kind of repeatedly, right? So the only change syntactically is a finalize call. It's not, you never final, you can keep extracting more. So it becomes, instead of finalize s, it becomes next of s. It outputs the next bits, but also it also updates the states, and you can keep going. And but the security thing, the attacker has more capabilities now, more calls. But anyway, you can extend the attacker. Calls can be made in arbitrary order to refresh an X. Attacker can control sources. Standard state compromise. Anyway, we can make a definition. It's more complex, but we've done it. So this is PRNG with input. This is kind of the high-level model of PRNG with input. And now, given our discussion about seedless PRNGs, we can, with some subtle but important changes, but small changes, we can extend our analysis. Like, for example, for Sponge, just to give you an idea of the subtleties, this whole thing is invertible, right? From here, you can invert the permutation if you know. So basically, here, if you control some of the sources, basically you can invert the state. So that's kind of not good, right? If you output the thing, so you can check if you outputted something before. So luckily there was a paper in a different context analyzed by Hutchinson. So basically the things that we should output Y, but we cannot just do this because you can invert it forward. So we just need to do this little forward XOR, and that probably solves the problem. Makes it, the Davis-Myers trick kind of works here as well. But so it's we had to prove it and so on, but things kind of work. All right, so are we done with PRNG? I have maybe 10 minutes to think, so the answer is no. We are not done with PRNGs. So what didn't we cover? James Bond, right? So no time to die. We're going to rename it no time to hash. So the problem with any practical, okay, so you can use hash function, just use a hash function as your PRNG, you're done, fantastic, you have this SHA-3 construction. The problem is, it's the interrupts come at this gazillion, super fast pace. SHA-3, whatever, SHA-2 are good hash functions, but not good enough to handle those gazillion of interrupts in a second, and you want to buffer those gazillion interrupts. So what do you do? So this is a heuristic solution that we actually analyzed, wrote papers in the last few years. So this is a heuristic solution that people do. They design the split refresh function into fast refresh and slow refresh. So first, that's my own animations, I guess, animated gives basically every timing of interrupt goes into the fast refresh function and updates the register. So there is, you split the state into a bunch of registers, and this kind of super fast, you do something super quick, like 10 cycles or something whatever. I'll tell you what you do. And then after a bunch of those things, when you have enough time to evaluate the slow hash functions, you do this little turtle guy, and that actually updates your state. And the user who likes turtles and is afraid of, the cheetahs, is only interacts with this slow state, and that's when you run this kind of thing. So this is kind of a popular thing, to split it into fast refresh and slow refresh. And the question, idea, so fast refresh, they do something, a bunch of registers, each of them maybe have a little bit. Then you interrupt, you do one of those, you update one of those, actually update, these registers in some super fast way, and the important thing is you don't need to randomness here. That's what I wanted to write here, I think. So accumulation is enough. You just want to make sure that if you do this like super fast procedure on something that says 0, 1 bits of entropy, or like very few, this entropy doesn't disappear or doesn't shrink or doesn't cancel out or whatever. It kind of accumulates. But you don't need full extraction, and then eventually we'll just apply some slow hash function on these registers to get truly random bits. So to look a little bit inside it, and I will switch to more survey kind of thing here. So this is what Windows and both Windows and Apple do it, right? So this is a fast accumulator in Windows and Apple. In Linux, they chose to do something slightly different. It's just like cyclic rotation by 5 or whatever, by some amount. They take a 32-bit register. So this is a current 32-bit register. This is like next timing of interrupt, 32-bit string, which is the next clock, reading of the clock for the interrupt. You rotate this guy cyclically by 5 bits, and then you XOR. So this is apparently like 7 clock cycles or something like that. So it's super fast, but this is basically, you cannot do something much slower than this, like for every interrupt. And of course, so this is output, and hopefully intuitively it kind of things will mix well. You get more and more entropy this way. And of course you can ask like weird questions, and that's what I mean. I literally asked Neil Ferguson 5, and he told me heuristic something. He's like, no, 11 you can use, and he was right. I mean, as you'll see. But there are like some subtle things, but we try to understand what is going on. Can we prove it in any model? So just to give you a little bit of things. So one thing, unfortunately, so as I said, we separate refresh into fast refresh and slow refresh. And the question is, if you want to prove anything, we need to cut corners somewhat, because the extractor function is so non-cryptographic. It's like so fast. Clearly, if the attacker, it's like very easy to invert. So in a fully adversarial mode, it would be kind of bad. So we try to cut some corners. What can we do? And this is where this other kind of things, like limit class of sources, maybe we can security to some extent. Instead of extraction, we do some kind of entropy accumulation, and so on. So anyway, this so we kind of had to assume some strong independence assumptions on different things. But just to get, there is some heuristic, but it's kind of provable, and we did answer why 5 is better than 11, right, in a very well-defined way. And this is a cool thing. I mean, I'm kind of, a little bit blown away by this, even though it's my own paper, but somehow it's like a super practical thing. We talked about a document about Windows thing. Somehow when we model it and try to analyze it, we actually had to use some, not super fancy, but some techniques from Fourier analysis. So to me, it's kind of a cool thing, how theory, and we explained pretty well, as I'll show you in the pictures, what happens in Windows and Apple RNG. So it was kind of cool, I think, like a win for theory, to justify some practical design with theoretical analysis. So we have 2 papers. I will not tell you much. So this paper was an applied paper, more at crypto. So what we did, we just really, I wanted to say why 5 is better than 11 or whatever. Windows uses 5, Apple uses 7. Is 5 and 7, they seem to be equally good as it turns out. And this paper was more theoretical. We said, let's abstract it to some kind of metrics, like more. So this was mainly basically specifically cyclic rotations and things like that. It was general linear transformations. And anyway, so we had some results. Maybe the details are not important. But here we really found the combinatorial condition of these things, like something called covering number, which is a simple property of permutation, which probably governs the speed of condensing somehow. Never mind what it is, it's just, as I said, it could be a separate talk. But it was kind of nice that we managed to do it. And it allows us to compare different rotation amounts to each other. And as a result, we could formally say in our models that both Apple and Microsoft choices are good. For both 32 and 64-bit architecture, and also the other cool thing. I'll maybe stop in 2 minutes, maybe. But we now that we formalize this kind of covering number, we computed specific covering numbers for this, concrete numbers, 5, 32, and so on, and they turned out to be nearly optimal. But of course, you can say a theoretical question. What about if instead of 62, whatever you start parameterize the problem? That was a calculation. This function is super nasty. It's really hard to compute these covering numbers, but we designed a permutation, a general permutation for any n called bit reverse permutation, which you can prove basically near optimal covering number. And even though for concrete choices it was basically the same quality as the Microsoft choices, actually Niels Ferguson, he considered it. He actually tried to code it up, but he said, listen, it's too slow for this 5 and 32 to do this bit reverse permutation would be, I cannot afford like 70 cycles instead of like 7 cycles. So yeah, it was a no-go, but anyway, it was cool that he actually considered it and read the paper, asked me questions and so on. So here's some pictures. So details kind of not important. This is black is a lower bound. The lower the better. It's like how fast you condense. Red is what we achieve for various numbers. So this is Microsoft choice 32 and 5. So the red is pretty close to the low bound. This is Apple's choice 7, also like relatively good. There are some other good numbers over here, but if I draw 11, it would be like somewhere here. For reasons that is clear from this covering number. For 64-bit architecture, also we got some good numbers. And this is like this new permutation in green that we put, and we compare green and red, which is existing. They're basically kind of comparable, but the green one works in general, and red ones are like specific ones. Anyway, so this is how the theoretical one kind of looks, just to give you a picture. It has like a nice description, but yeah. Anyway, just to finish up, are we finally done? The answer is no, but for this talk will be yes. So the things that I'm not going to cover is this thing called can you have your entropy unknitted too, which is this premature output attack, which like Fortuna and other things address. So we have a couple of cool papers about that, but for the purposes of this talk, it just shows you that every time you think, every time I write this paper in this subject, I think it's the last paper, there is nothing else to do, and then something else comes up. So I'm waiting. Sorry, no, I didn't want to go here. So let me summarize. So I think it's kind of a nice area. It leads to good theoretical questions with diverse connections we used in different papers, like idealized model, Fourier analysis, combinatorics, covering numbers. So it was actually, I really enjoyed like some low bounds. So it was kind of a nice area for me. It has implications it has real world implications. We look at like practical constructions used in the real world, kind of analyze them formally. It influences practical design, even though Linux, he used some of those things, they didn't go all the way. Anyway, and I think it's important that seedless PRNGs are important. And hopefully we are at least here yet. We are kind of at the Smiggle stage, but hopefully soon we'll get in whoever this guy is. All right, thank you.